Believers. We are talking with David Hatcher Childress, founder of Adventures Unlimited Press, explorer and author. And we've spent about an hour talking about his new book, The Mystery of the Olmecs. Fascinating material with talking with David here. And I'd like to switch gears a little bit more now and talk with David about some of his other books and subjects. As we mentioned in the previous segment, David has written a lot on lost cities, not only of South America, but other places, about Atlantis, connecting with Lemuria and so forth, ancient continents and cities, and also about the technology of the gods. And I would like to begin to talk a little bit about this subject and kind of keep the subject of lost continents and lost cities in the background, so to speak. I feel in a way that we mentioned in the previous section that there have been cataclysms recurring, coming and going, and I feel that these subjects actually are connected in a way, that the technological advancements kind of gone awry actually could have led to the destruction of many of the cities or even continents perhaps of the ancient world. And I don't know, would you agree on that at all, David?
Oh, yes, I would agree. And I think that in the past there have been many destructions, and some of them are just natural. I mean, it's a natural thing for the Earth to have volcanic eruptions and earthquakes and tidal waves, and mankind just has to be aware of that. And I think that's one reason we were talking about before, that certain megalithic structures are built out of giant blocks and fitted together so they can withstand these occasional earthquakes and things. And like in Peru, there's very frequent, huge earthquakes, even just like the one they had only a month ago.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But there's also these man-made disasters too, and I think that's more what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, because one thing you mentioned in the previous segment was the potentially that many of these ancient civilizations could have had electricity and things like this. I mean, if we talk about weaponry, I mean, there are legends going back to, there are places today in Africa where you can find rare kinds of stone, where actually the desert had been turned into glass, basically.
Glass, that's right, yeah.
And there is a connection potentially here with ancient atomic warfare. So I mean, that's huge,
Yeah, right. And I do have an entire chapter about that in my book, Technology of the Gods, and it's a fascinating subject. When you read like the ancient Hindu epics, the Mahabharata and the Drona Parva, the Ramayana, which is part of the Mahabharata. I mean, they read like the wildest science fiction. It's like some Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers scenario where people are flying around in these airships called Vimanas. Mm. They have these tremendous weapons. They're going around. They're blasting entire cities, wiping everybody out. Weapons are, just turning rock into glass. In archaeology, there's a mystery known as vitrification, and that is where large walls and the rock or brick is fused and melted. And what's interesting, you read these stories. I mean, people are flying around in these airships, they're blasting each other. Mm. I mean, it's this horrific wars and terrible destruction. Mm. Yet when British and Indian and Pakistani archaeologists began excavating these cities out in the Sindh Desert on the borders of India and Pakistan, cities like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Kot-Diji, places like that, what they found was exactly what was described in these ancient Hindu epics, and that was that people were just lying dead in the streets. Some doom had taken these cities, wiped everybody out. People were just dead in the streets, holding hands. No one had even buried the dead. everyone in these cities wiped out, like just like the ancient Indian epics had said. Then the desert came in and covered these areas. You have areas in Egypt, which is near the southwest corner of Egypt, where there's huge sheets of glass out in the desert, and they don't know how these glass sheets would have formed. But when you detonate atomic weapons, that's in a sandy desert. That's what happens. Sheets of glass are made. When they did the excavations at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, they found these black, glassy globs in the cities, and those things was ceramic pottery that had become so hot it had melted into just this glassy, vitreous, mess. The whole idea of ancient civilizations having airships, having electricity, it seems fantastic. Yet, as I go through in my book, Technology of the Gods, it's not so far-fetched. And in fact, it is what the ancient books and things are basically saying, that they had this stuff. One way to look at it, too, is to say, take a place like New Guinea, north of Australia. I've been to New Guinea a number of times. This is areas where you have these cargo cults and things like that. New Guinea today is very much like a Stone Age country. You go there, there are not factories in New Guinea. People do not have jobs. There are cars. You do have some airports. Planes land there. But those planes aren't made in New Guinea. And no, the cars aren't made there either. Right. And the people in New Guinea, they don't know how those things work. They couldn't fix an airplane. To them, it's some foreign technology. But it's there. So you have here really technology, say, coming from Europe and America and Japan, and it's being brought to New Guinea. It's landed on airports. People jump in, jump out. They unload some cargo. Then these planes leave again. But, the people in New Guinea really, all that technology and whatnot, that's something totally strange to them and totally foreign. And if those planes should just be left there, and if the rest of the world was somehow destroyed, they wouldn't be able to fix those planes or do anything with them. So this is kind of a similar thing that we might have had in the past, where certain areas of the world, in India, in ancient Egypt, Peru, wherever, you had these centers. And we're talking 10,000 years ago or something. You had these centers that had high technology. People were living in these giant buildings. There was electricity. They had metallurgical factories where they were making iron, steel. They made machines, cogged machines, just like we have today. Generators, just like you can land some seaplane on any remote island like that, and then jump in, jump out, go fishing, and then leave. These airships were capable of going around the world. They would go to remote islands. They would go to other civilizations. Perhaps it would land on top of pyramids. The natives there would worship these people perhaps as gods, even though they were just normal humans, just like we are, who happen to understand, how machines work, how electricity works. It's kind of amazing. We know that ancient civilizations had electricity. We know that. There have been batteries have been found in Baghdad. They know that they were used for electroplating. In my book, Technology of the Gods, I show how there were temples in Egypt that had apparently some kind of electric lighting and things like that. Really, to have flight, ancient flight, and you need really two things. You've got to have metals, and the technology of making metals, and then you need electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you have metals and electricity, you've got flight. And the ancient Vimanas, by the way, which is interesting in itself, when you read the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, it's a lot like you're reading, say, a modern novel of some hero. And, the hero in your story, maybe he goes to the airport in London. He gets on British Airways and he flies to Singapore or something like that.
Mm.
Well, when you're reading a novel like that, the author doesn't suddenly say, "Oh, this is what an airplane is. This is how airplanes work. They have these jet, motors. They have these wings. They have all these seats." That's not what they say. I mean, they know. You know what an airplane is.
Mm-hmm.
So the hero just needs to get in an airplane and go to Singapore. And that's how the ancient Hindu epics read, too. I mean, they talk about these airships, Vimanas and things like that, but they don't describe them in great detail because they know that you know what a Vimana is. But now what happened was in 1908, in the Royal Baroda Library in central India, they found this ancient book. And it was over 2,000 years old, and it was called the Vimanika Shastra.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a book that had been copied from older books and kept in this old Sanskrit library. And it was a book entirely about these Vimanas. And it was a book that talked about the different kinds of Vimanas. There was 4 different kinds. There was a kind of a Vimana that was like a helicopter. There was a kind of a Vimana that was like an airplane. There was a kind of a Vimana that was like a Zeppelin or a tubular airship. Mm-hmm. And there was a kind of Vimana that was like a flying saucer.
Really?
Yeah, and these were the 4 types of Vimanas. And in fact, I have a whole chapter on that in my book, Technology of the Gods. But I also am the co-author of a book entirely about Vimanas. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that book is called Vimana Aircraft of Ancient India and Atlantis. And you can find that book also on our website at adventuresunlimitedpress.com.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a totally fascinating story about the whole Vimana thing. And I guess, what you're referring to there is, let's say like this, if we read a novel today or even a book, there is more of a documentation of something, just because they mention someone taking a flight, they don't go on to explain what an airplane is, but they count on that you actually know what the heck an airplane is, right? That's what you're saying there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you know what an airplane is, and so yeah, I mean, why spend time in your story explaining what an airplane is when everyone knows? And that's how the ancient texts were. I mean, one of the things that's so important about, I think, especially ancient India, is that, and this has to do with these books, history has been destroyed over and over again, purposely destroyed. Libraries burnt. The Emperor Qi Huangdi of China, who built the Great Wall of China, and he ordered every book in China destroyed. 500 BC. We have the famous destruction of the library at Alexandria in Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of books were burned. The same thing happened in Mexico when